Well, thank you so much. My name is Joe
Yeah.
Kelly, and I'm running for the US Senate. I'm running because too many people are suffering. America is only as strong as our weakest link. The 5 top priorities, and there are many priorities in our campaign, and we don't have time to go through all of those, but I'll go through quickly our top 5. We know that we have to reduce the cost of healthcare, including mental health. We know that we have to reduce the cost of education and address student debt. As Democrats, we know that we have to stimulate the economy and create more jobs. We also know that we have to protect the environment and address climate change. And last but not least, we know that we have to provide equal protection under the law. And of course, that includes reproductive rights, and that of course also includes voting rights. These are not only important, but they're personal to us. And let me tell you why they're personal to me. I am the eldest of 18 brothers and sisters. We grew up very poor, as you might expect. I grew up in a 10-foot wide by 55-foot long trailer. My dad he got a good education, but he wasn't able to attend college. And so he said, Jewel, you're going to go to college. And I listened. And thanks be to God, I was the first to graduate college, first to get my MBA. And I also have a second master's degree in legal studies from the Washington University School of Law. Shortly after I finished my MBA, our country was attacked on September 11, 2001. And 2 months later, I raised my right hand to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I served 2 tours, one in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and another in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. After serving 10 years, I left the military and I was hired by GE Healthcare. With GE Healthcare, we made the ventilators that were used in such critical supply during the pandemic. After that, I met my beautiful wife, Karen, and she is why I stayed in Missouri. And I certainly don't regret that decision. I came to love Missouri. We have 3 daughters. Karen's eldest daughter is an ER nurse. My daughter is 18, and our youngest daughter tragically took her life by suicide. And we went through those 4 stages of grief: the shock of her death, the anger, the depression, and the acceptance that nothing is going to change unless we change. America also went through those 4 stages of grief in 2020. We saw the shock of George Floyd's death. We experienced the depression of the pandemic. We also experienced the anger around January 6th. And just like we did, we accepted that nothing is going to change unless we change. So that's why I'm running. And what I'm offering is that if we're going to win Missouri, it's a tough state, but it's got to be based on principle. Is it legal? Is it safe? And is it fair? We are one country under God, one race, the human race, one standard, justice, safety, equality. Have no fear. Our flag is still here. Thank you very much for listening.
All right. Thank you very much. Now I will turn it over to Lucas Kuntz for his introduction.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Lucas Kuntz. Just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Jeff City, actually, kind of in a working class neighborhood, Dunklin Street, if anybody's been there. And, none of us really had any money, but it was a magical place to grow up. Kids running in and out of each other's houses, everybody taking care of each other. Like when my little sister was born with a heart condition, she actually was airlifted up to Children's Hospital here, and just everybody in the community took us in to their houses. When we went bankrupt from that experience, people down at my mom's prayer group raised money for us, and people brought food by the house. Like if you're from Missouri, you've seen this before. I remember sitting in our living room and seeing more just lasagna and casserole roll through the front door than I could ever eat. And so, for me, that's the magic of growing up in a place like Missouri. I experienced it again when I worked really hard and got into Yale out of Jeff City High School, and didn't have enough money to go, but people around town gave me scholarships, and I got a Pell Grant from the federal government so I could go live this life like the movies. And so for me, I've been spending my life since then just trying to pay everybody back and honor what everyone did for me. And so Probably the biggest thing I did for that was I joined the Marine Corps. I became a Marine officer. I spent 13 years in the Marine Corps. I went to Iraq once, where I led a police training team, dodging IEDs, trying to train the Iraqis up. I went to Afghanistan twice on special operations task forces, learned Pashto, tried to build that country up too. And then I spent my last tour actually at the Pentagon, where I led US arms control negotiations. So I would, I'd work with the National Security Council to come up with US policy, CIA, State Department. I'd go over to NATO, get our allies on board, and then I'd go negotiate with the Russians, which was just a real honor in my life, sitting behind that United States of America placard and representing our country. And so after that, I decided to join a nonprofit that fights corporate monopoly power. I did that because, I thought joining the military was the best way to serve my old neighborhood. And then every time I came home from deployments, it seemed like the fight was actually right here in Missouri. Like my first house is now an empty lot. The corner stores boarded up. The grocery stores where they let my mom float a check are now gone. And so for me, I just find that incredibly difficult to see such a magical neighborhood kind of deteriorate like that. And I think it's because massive corporations and Wall Street bought off our politicians, and they sold our state for parts. And so I'm running to change that. Probably get more questions later, can talk about it. Also, if anyone wants to get in touch, you can email me later and we can maybe meet up or talk. But the last thing I just want to do is give you guys a quick update on the race. And that's that, it's going really well. I mean, I joined this race as basically nobody, never held elected office, no email list, no nothing. And we've raised $1.75 million so far in the race. We just got our top opponent, Eric Schmidt's fundraising numbers. This quarter we raised $840,000 without a dime coming from corporate PACs, all small dollar donors. And we actually outraised Eric Schmidt by $200,000. We're putting this race on the map. I'm really excited to win it for Missouri, to put it on the map, to get us that attention and actually, fundamentally change who has power in our country, so that these corporations who've been buying people off don't have it anymore. And it comes back into the hands of people like those who took care of me when I was a kid and took care of my family, which is who should be running the country. So a little bit about me, but I hope we can all meet up in person sometime and stay in touch. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucas. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Gina Ross.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to be before you. I'm Dr. Gina Ross. I'm a native of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I moved to Missouri in 2008 when I left my ex-husband, who said if I left, I wouldn't make it. Without him, wouldn't be nothing without him, but I'm a hard worker, I'm a conqueror, and I'm an overcomer. And so here I am today. All my children are grown now. They're 20, 22, and soon to be 26. They all graduated from Platte County High School. I'm an associate professor of business at Kansas City, Kansas Community College. I teach several classes. I also teach American government in the spring semester, but my favorite classes are human relations and business and customer service, because everyone should have that skill set in anything, really, in your personal relationships and all. I have an earned PhD in public policy and administration. I have a master's degree in public administration, a bachelor's in business administration with a concentration in organizational psychology and development. So that coincides with why sometimes people are resistant to change. I also have an associate's degree in urban ministries. I went as part of my school assignment to the Los Angeles Dream Center and had to live like a homeless person for 7 days, which was a very humbling experience that I'll never forget. And we stayed where Nightmare on Elm Street was filmed, Freddy Krueger. It was a little spooky, but it was humbling at the same time. So I'm glad for that. I was the primary winner for Missouri 6th Congressional District in 2020. I won the primary with COVID. I got COVID on the campaign trail. And as you may hear, my voice sounds a little raspy at this point. My voice comes and goes. I'm a long hauler, but I am having surgery in the next 2 weeks to take care of this muscle tension dysphonia. So my voice may sound a little impaired, but my voice is not silent, because my voice will speak to represent all people. Let me see, what else can I say about myself really quick? I didn't win the general election, but I did have 118,926 votes. I was defeated by Rep. Sam Graves, a 20-year incumbent. But, you know, my win doesn't have to look like anybody else's win because I still won, because the only way that I fail is by trying. And let me just rewind back really quick. When I won the primary, I defeated 4 opponents with only 88 cents in my Congress checking account. That just shows you that I know money's important, but when people believe in you, they will vote for you. The reason why I'm running, I deliberated after January 6th when the insurrection happened, and everyone needs to be represented in Missouri from every corner of Missouri, from Platte County to Chesterfield, where you are, North St. Louis, just everywhere. I just believe everyone should be represented. I know I'm rushing because I don't want that sign to come up to tell me that I'm out of time. So it just makes me a little nervous. I got 30 seconds, but I'm running to represent all people, no person left behind. We're better together, building a better tomorrow beginning today. I believe in paving the way for change. Democracy is first, because if democracy is in order, I believe everything else shall fall in place. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now, Mr. Shepherd, Timothy Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Keene, and thank you, Chesterfield Democratic Club. It is so good to meet all of you. And thank you, fellow candidates, for really celebrating this form of democracy, and for everyone. I know what a journey this is. I'm going to spend a bit of time on my early life. I grew up on the west side of state in a little town called Kearney, and the town next to it called Excelsior Springs. It's about an hour north of Kansas City. And I'm really proud of my family's roots in this state. My great-grandparents made their home in St. Joe in their business. My grandpa on my mom's side grew up very poor on a farm near the Iowa border in Gallatin. And my grandparents on my dad's side really happily retired in a beautiful village right on the shores of Bull Shoals Lake, right down by the southern border of the state. Like a lot of my fellow Missourians, I grew up on Team Have-Nots, and so I won't go into a lot of detail there. But fast forwarding a few years, I grew up very evangelical within the Assembly of God denomination, which is pretty big here in Missouri, and that took me ultimately to be pursuing a path as a missionary, helping serve underprivileged women in North Africa to be able to help them connect to the fair trade markets. And I was back here in Missouri on a fundraising trip to be able to sustain that endeavor. And lo and behold, I finally reconciled at the age of 27 my LGBTQ status with my status as an evangelical person. And unfortunately, the institution that I was a part of, they didn't agree with that reconciliation. And so they invited me to leave. But I was really lucky to be here in Missouri, and especially right here in the Kansas City area, because we're really blessed and privileged to have one of the world's preeminent foundations, the Kauffman Foundation. They're leaders in entrepreneurship and education. And it was through one of their community outreach programs that I was able to take part in a series of events that would really change the trajectory of my professional life, despite having dropped out of college due to student loan debt. And so a few years later, I found myself as an executive at a major finance firm in New York. And that's where I would get the opportunity to really put my LGBTQ activism to work. And it was when they were moving their headquarters from New York down to Tennessee. I was one of the first executives on the ground as part of the headquarters transition, and it came to me as soon as we got there that the Tennessee legislature, which is very similar to our own conservative supermajority, was introducing 7 LGBTQ discrimination bills. And so I got to work with the activist community, and we were able to convince the chief operating officer at my company to write a letter to the state legislature on behalf of a social issue. We became the first major company in the state's history to do that. And alongside with the grassroots effort from activists and other private sector activists, we got a lot of other big companies to join us in signing that letter. And I'm so proud to say not a single one of those 7 discrimination bills even made it out of committee during that session. And so that was an incredible opportunity. It was the first time in my life that I was able to make a really good impact in the world. And the next thing that I set out to do was fight the for-profit prison industry. This time, my employer wasn't as enthusiastic about joining me, and so they forbade me from doing anything. And I used that opportunity to get into some good trouble. And in the face of having my chairmanship of the resource group stripped from me, my bonus stripped down, and my livelihood threatened, I'm very proud to say we turned it all around. And a year later, we were able to stop a $700 billion company from trading for-profit prisons. And there's a lot more we can talk about, and I look forward to doing that with everybody offline. Feel free to reach me at tshepherd.com. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. And now I'll turn it over to Scott Sifton.
Thanks. The first step, of course, is to unmute ourselves. Thank you for that. My name is Scott Sifton, Democratic candidate for United States Senate. I have spent the last decade fortunate and blessed to be raising two beautiful and wonderful children. And during that time, I have also served in the Missouri legislature, 1 term in the state house and 8 years, 2 terms in the Missouri Senate. That said, I wasn't always necessarily going to follow that path. Around the time we were starting a family, I was at a crossroads and was considering what I wanted to do. I'd served on the local Board of Education for 9 years in Afton and was considering whether to continue in public service. And what swayed me is what happened to my neighbors, the folks that lived behind us. They were a 3-income family. The father had 2 jobs, the mother had 1, and she lost her teaching job. And shortly thereafter, they were out of that house, and we lost them as neighbors. And I remember the day they moved out. Their children were playing in the backyard, a little bit younger then than mine are now. And I remember wondering what impact all that was going to have on them and how it was going to change their lives. And I identified with it because something very similar happened to my family when I was 15 and growing up in Kansas City. My father lost his job. My parents went bankrupt. My father turned over the keys to the home we grew up in to the bank. We lost our family minivan. And at age 15, I became a waiter and a dishwasher and a cashier and a buffet attendant at the local steakhouse. And from there was tremendously fortunate. Went to great public schools, got into Truman State University on scholarship, and from there into a nationally ranked law school, and tremendously fortunate and have tried to give back. I was very strongly encouraged to run for state house in 2010, did so, managed to hold an open seat on a day when Democrats unfortunately lost 17 seats in the state house. That was the 2010 Obama midterm. 2 years later, I was asked to run for state senate, and we defeated a full-term Republican incumbent state senator. I believe I'm the only one to have done that in the last 30 years in Missouri. 4 years later, the Republicans actually spent more than $1 million trying to beat us, and we had the Trump wave to contend with, and we won by even more. So we've won some tremendously difficult races in very competitive territory against well-funded Republicans. We've proven we can do it. And I've proven what I will do in office, fighting for democratic values on the floor of the Missouri Senate. In the Senate, I was a strong advocate against right to work, led efforts to stop the procedural maneuvers to force that through. And you know that I will support the PRO Act in Washington. I have spent more time filibustering bad anti-choice legislation in the Missouri Senate over the last decade than just about anybody. And I will ensure that any judicial nominee who comes up for a vote in the U.S. Senate is good on Roe versus Wade. And I'm gravely concerned about what happens to Roe this summer. I fought against employment discrimination, a bill that Eric Greitens, our likely opponent, signed in the Senate, Senate Bill 43. I also helped get some of the Ferguson Commission's recommendations adopted into law. So you know that I'll stand up for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and the Eric Garner Excessive Use of Force Act. Led the longest filibuster in the state's history against an anti-marriage equality amendment. My father was a member of the LGBT community, and it's important to me. I'm out of time. Look forward to continuing the conversation as we go.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sifton. And now Next will be Spencer Toder for his introduction.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. Like the other candidates, I'm running for U.S. Senate. I can honestly say that the reason that I'm running is I got so sick and tired of yelling at the TV and being frustrated, not feeling like I had control over what was going on in the world, and seeing so many problems around me that seemed solvable if only we had a government that cared. If only there were people who focused on solving problems and listening to others and listening to experts and working together to end the madness that has surrounded us. I think that the Trump years in general have been devastating to our society. The division, the anger, the hate, the rhetoric that has been created is tearing families apart, to be perfectly honest. And as I sat with my wife and during COVID and we watched, you know, all of the news of everything going on, and we were trying to figure out how do we make the biggest impact possible, I determined that the best way to do that was to take this Senate seat, to pass voting rights legislation, to blow up the filibuster in the process, and to work towards climate change reform, and really addressing the problems that ail us. If we don't pass voting rights legislation, I truly believe that our democracy is in great jeopardy. We are tasked daily with combating literally an enemy that has no interest in preserving democracy. If you look at the things that the current GOP stand for, notice I'm not saying the current Republicans stand for, because there are plenty of Republicans who are sick and tired of this too. But if you look at the things that the GOP stands for, it's anti-science, it's anti-humanity, it's oftentimes quite racist, and it's destroying our society. And if you look at the factors at play, we've got very few ways to disseminate information, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or the newspaper, which fewer and fewer people read, or local news, which fewer and fewer people watch. And so it's becoming easier and easier for us to become divided, because it's very profitable for people to divide us, and is very successful for those in power to remain in control when we are divided. So I'm running to bring us together. You won't see millions and millions of advertisements from me around the country. You won't see huge fundraising numbers for my first 2 quarters. What you will see is that I'm in the community every single day. I am averaging 1 oil change every 2 weeks currently, as I travel the state and get to know people and listen and try to make a difference in their community. I'm confident that the foundation of everything that is wrong with our society currently is a lack of trust. And that lack of trust comes from people being failed time after time by people in the community, by our government, by those around them who they thought would be there as their safety nets. And those safety nets haven't existed for too long for too many people. Republicans tend to think that the best way to deal with that is less government. And Democrats think the government may be a solution for that. So my goal as I go into the community and I build relationships is to build trust. It's to help people on a daily basis and to show them that with little acts and by making each other's lives better, we can rebuild that trust that brings us together, and we can earn votes that way. I don't believe we're going to win this election if it isn't every single one of us working every single day to do little things that just move the ball a little bit further and further down the field. And so I've committed my life for the next 2 years, or I guess it's 15, 16 months until the election, to win this election and to flip Missouri's Senate seat so we can take what's rightfully ours, what we believe in, and give everyone a voice. You look at cities like St. Louis and Kansas City, and you've got 65 and 53% turnouts. The people who don't vote still want representation. They want better healthcare, education, and they want a society that works for them. They just don't have the same resources or the belief that their voices matter. And it is up to us to get out there and to make sure that their voices are heard. And that is why I'm running. You can reach out to me at spencertoder.com. Toder's Toder. My website has a floating face of myself in the corner, and you're welcome to click that. It starts a conversation with me. I respond to conversations every morning with a video response. I look forward to your questions, and thank you again. Spencer Toder, running for U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to everyone for your fine introductions and to staying on time. That's helping us keeping on track here this evening. So now we're going to open it up to questions. And the first person who will respond, as I said, we're going to just keep shuffling down the list. We'll go to Lucas Kuntz, and then Dr. Gina Ross will follow on down. So our first question is, what is your clear and consistent message and strategy to convince rural voters of the state to vote for you?
Yeah, so I'm from Jeff City. My grandparents had a farm outside of Columbia. Like rural voters aren't that different than most anybody else. The thing is that everybody wants to fundamentally change who has power in our country. And so, that is the theme of our campaign. It's what we're trying to do. It's why we're raising money without taking any from corporate PACs. It's why we want to abolish corporate PACs altogether. And that's just what we got to do. And so, like, what it really comes down to on this, though, is showing the linkages between urban, suburban, and rural voters and on that message. And so, I mentioned before that I work at a nonprofit that fights corporate monopoly power. And so we've actually been hugely successful in that. We've helped run hearings. I've helped run hearings in Congress. I wrote a section of the National Defense Authorization Act. And we just about 2 months ago helped write an executive order for President Biden that he signed into law on competition policy. And so what this competition policy order does is it goes after big pharma. So these are like the companies that take the price of insulin from $25 to $275 a dose. People in every place in the state are being subjected to that sort of oppression. We go after big tech. We go after, which, people in rural Missouri hate big tech, as they should. We've seen what big tech's been up to in the news lately. We go after defense monopolies. And lastly, this executive order and a lot of our work goes after agricultural monopolies. And so when you look at our state, our rural areas have been absolutely destroyed by agricultural consolidation, whether it's in the meatpacking industry, dairy farming, hog production. You got Smithfield being owned by China, of all places. Our state ledge helped sell our land to China over that. And anything else, you're raising chickens, you're under contracts from Tyson. It's very oppressive. Like, people understand that. They know what's going on. They want to fundamentally change who has power. They're tired of these big companies buying off our politicians, Democrats and Republicans, to write laws that work for the companies and not for them. And so we're keeping this message the exact same no matter where we are. It's been very effective and we've had a great time doing it.
Right. Thank you. And now, Dr. Ross, same question.
Okay. I support bringing jobs back to the rural areas, back to rural Missouri, excuse me. I also support agricultural advancement. I support country of origin labeling and to support our row crop producers. I don't know why I can't talk today. I think I'm just a little nervous. Excuse me, y'all. I'm human, so I don't try to be perfect, but I just try to get my message across clearly. Climate change, curbing that. I support a national adaptation policy that includes investment in infrastructure, flood mitigation efforts, and sustainable farming, and communication and collaboration with the entire community. I also would work to make sure that there's internet and broadband in all rural areas. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Shepherd, same question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The way that we are getting out there and talking to Missouri voters is really by showing up. We've seen a lot of atrophy over the years with the Democratic Party having successful outreach in rural areas. And so we started just by going all over the state and talking to folks about the change that needs to happen. And the message that's really resonating right now, everyone can feel it, frankly, in both parties. The country's choosing between autocracy and democracy, and different people from different political persuasions, they articulate that in very, different terms. But the truth is, there's a yawning and growing wealth gap in this country between the billionaires and millionaires and ordinary income Americans. And I found that it really resonates with people whenever we can talk about the structure that gives the people, the millionaires and the billionaires, the ability to exercise up to 1 million times more influence over an election every single cycle than an ordinary income American. And so we've taken that message and we've had that conversation in towns like Clarence, Missouri at their festival. We've been in Palmyra, Missouri for Flag Day. We've been in Poplar Bluff supporting the local union there. And we're just taking this message door to door and talking to every single person in this state to rebuild the party and to rebuild the relationships and the neighborliness between the candidates who are running to represent them. And so fundamentally, what we want to do is align myself as a candidate to the constituents that I'm aiming to represent and not to special interests. And so the number one issue in order to pass any of our agenda is going to be ending the impact of Citizens United and being able to articulate that as we get across the state.
Oh, thank you very much. Mr. Toder, your response to the same question, please.
Sure. Would you like Scott to take it first? Either way, I'm fine. I know that you had an order in mind, and he came off his back on camera, so I want to be respectful.
I'm
of
sorry.
that.
You are correct. I am human as well, as we talked about tonight. So you're right. To stay in order, Mr. Sifton, I'm sorry. I did not mean to jump over you.
No worries at all. This happens. And for the record, just so everybody knows, I actually still owe Jewel Kelly 45 seconds from a forum that he and I and Spencer were at a few weeks ago. So hopefully I'll get to pay him back tonight. We'll see. For rural voters, first and foremost, hopefully Democrats in Congress and President Biden will be delivering on the infrastructure bill. And that's going to mean rural broadband. That's going to mean roads and bridges and a lot of other things that are important to rural voters and to the rest of us. So hopefully we see that get done, and that gives us something to run on. And I think that's going to help improve the economy and allow us to deliver a message on the strength of the economy as well. Same for access to healthcare. Medicaid expansion's got to happen in Missouri. Medicare expansion needs to happen with the Build Back Better Act. And I think to the extent voters in different parts of the state see Democrats working to improve their access to healthcare and make a meaningful difference to improve their lives, I think that certainly can't hurt. It's the right thing to do. And also agricultural land use. And I've been very active on that. I have fought for an ownership of Missouri farmland. I voted to sustain Governor Nixon's veto of that terrible legislation. And I also brought an amendment on the floor of the Missouri Senate to require all foreign owners of Missouri farmland to divest their holdings. Surprise, surprise, it got voted down on a party line vote, with Republicans all being just fine with foreign ownership of Missouri farmland, and every Democrat in the Senate having another view. I've also fought to protect local control of agricultural land use regulations so that folks at the county and municipal level get to make decisions regarding CAFOs as opposed to having it done by folks in Jefferson City. We won that fight in 2013 against a state senator named Mike Parson at the time, and unfortunately he clawed it right back in 2019, but we fought it as hard as we could. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And again, sorry about that. And now, Mr. Toder, it is your turn, and thank you for pointing that out to me.
No problem. Appreciate it. Yes, I think the first thing to recognize is that people in rural areas actually agree with the vast majority of our policies. If you look at Medicaid expansion, for instance, it wouldn't have passed without the 280,000 plus votes that came from rural communities. It passed by about 84,000 votes. And the people in rural communities really like the things we stand for. They like unions. They like making sure that people have hospitals near them, which have been shut down in large form because of what's been going on. They don't like CAFOs, these concentrating feeding operations that make pig feces run through the air. Is absolutely destroying both their quality of life as well as the water table around them. They don't like foreign ownership of land. They don't like the consolidation where almost all of the livestock in our state is actually owned by just a handful of companies, and the people raising it are leasing those animals until they pass them on. They don't like any of those things, but they also don't like being talked at. They like being talked with, and they like being listened to. And I think one of the big things that we do as Democrats is we show up in communities and we say things like, you're voting against your own interests. And what people say when that's said is they say, well, if you think I'm voting against my own interests, you think that I'm too dumb to know what's good for me. And I'm not. I'd rather vote for someone who listens to me and I trust than someone who thinks that I'm stupid. And so when I announced that I was running, I told some neighbors at my parents' farm out in Franklin County that I was running for office. And they said, but Spencer, there's already so many Republicans running. Why would you do that? And I said, well, I'm not a Republican. I'm running as a Democrat. And they said, you're a what? And that's kind of the point. The point is that there's so many things about our values and so many things about the issues we care about that are united and that we're aligned with, but rhetoric is dividing us. And we need to go out and build trust in communities to make sure that people know that our values are aligned and we can do better and we deserve representation that actually listens.
Thank you. And the last person to respond to this question, Mr. Kelly.
Yes, thank you. I started off by saying that there are 5 priorities that as Democrats we agree on: healthcare, jobs, education, environment, and equal protection. And when we started this race back in March, or at least when I started this race, I really thought healthcare, especially during the pandemic, was going to be the central issue. And healthcare is definitely important during the pandemic, and we haven't fought our way through that yet. But I really believe in rural America as well as with urban America, the reproductive rights and the abortion issue is once again going to become front and center. So when we talk about equal protection under the law, as Democrats, we certainly need to address that. That is a fundamental threat to the way that we live. And we certainly need to take every opportunity to make sure that as Democrats, we know that we have to fight. We can't take this lying down. Texas Senate Bill 8 did pass. The Supreme Court did not address it initially, and they won't address it unless we demand action. Same thing with the John Lewis Voting Act. So equal protection under the law is extremely important. As far as healthcare in rural America specifically, 14 hospitals have closed since 2014, 9 of those being rural hospitals. So the only way we're going to really provide healthcare, it's got to be affordable and it has to be accessible. As Democrats, we have to come up with a plan to reverse that trend. Expanding Medicaid and expanding Medicare is obviously important as well. And as Democrats, we have to make sure that the bills that are currently being negotiated right now, they actually get passed. And it's our job to communicate the advantages and the cost of those bills. In terms of stimulating jobs, the PRO Act, making it easier for people to unionize will certainly help. As far as raise the wage act, the $15 an hour minimum wage, that's extremely important. We know from an environment perspective, flooding and droughts are extremely critical to farmers. And so making sure that the budget, starting with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, is increased to provide better support for our farmers. And then education. It all starts with education and making sure that the Build Back Better plan is passed.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our second question of the evening now. And this time, Dr. Gina Ross will lead us off. And Missouri is a big and diverse state. What is your volunteer boots on the ground strategy for reaching every county in this state?
My strategy is to get out to every county. I'm just a little lagging behind right now because 4 weeks ago I got bitten by a spider, and that spider bite turned into cellulitis, which turned into MRSA. So I'm still recovering. My leg is wrapped up. But once I'm able to get out and about, I'm hopping and not stopping. I have been sending out emails, and I've been attending different forums such as this, but it's my plan to get out to every corner of Missouri. So I love people. I love talking to all people. I know no stranger. I'm just a people person. That's just my personality. So that's what I plan to do, is get out and mingle, chat, talk to people, listen to them, hear what their concerns are. And also just keep posting on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, that good stuff. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you. Our strategy to get out, boots on the ground, to every single constituent in this state. I think it's a really important question because this whole entire election is going to be won or lost on the ground. I think people have been oversaturated, quite frankly, in the air wars, if you will, television advertisements, social media advertisements. Not enough people are even on social media for us to really do a good job of turning out the vote. And so we have a great strategy to continue doing what we're doing, showing up absolutely everywhere and having conversations like I had in Clarence with a wonderful hog farmer who was very disappointed to learn that I'm running as a Democrat, but we had a great conversation about trade and making sure that we get trade agreements that favor her business. And down in Poplar Bluff, we have a large African-American community that has been very, very voter suppressed for a long time. And we've built really great inroads there with the local unions and with local ministers in Southwest Missouri. Thank you to the chicken industry. We have a really large constituents population of Latinx people that haven't been reached historically. And we're really excited to be building partnerships to be able to get out there and talk to those folks. And last, we're working with a lot of student organizations at campuses across our state. We're really blessed to have a distributed University of Missouri system that is actually really well distributed into the rural areas. And we're really excited to be working with them to collect volunteers and build out an organization to help get out there and knock on doors.
Thank you very much. And I will remember to go to Mr. Sifton now, and I will do this in the correct order.
Thank you very much. So we were in Kennett last week, and it was raining sideways, and what we were hoping to have an outdoor meeting, and that didn't quite pan out, and got back in the car, and sure enough, the low engine oil light came on, and then got to the hotel, and by the time we were there, the low tire pressure light came on. And the good folks in Dexter were able to help us with that. And actually, it turned out we'd just been driving so much since the last oil change that even though we'd gone off on mileage, the oil still looked good. So if you want an honest oil change person, go to Charlie's Fast Lube in Dexter. We intend to hit 114 counties and more than once. And for me, you know, I've been helping different candidates in different parts of the state for years. I've been serving with them in the halls in Jefferson City and interacting with local leaders everywhere from St. Louis to Kansas City and all four corners of the state. Worked with folks in Springfield on municipal issues there while in the legislature, and have it's less than 100 endorsers, but we're getting there quickly, and we're gonna use that network to help reinforce what we're doing with voters in every corner of the state. Look, I've won some incredibly tough races. The seat that I won in 2012, we lost. Somebody else was the Democratic candidate. We lost that seat by 36 ballots out of 90,000. The seat flipped red in the Obama wave year of 2008. That is how competitive South St. Louis County is. And so voter contact is absolutely everything. And I'm fond of saying, but it's the truth. In my 2016 reelect, we identified 35,000 homes that we wanted to get to. And due to the limits of having enough canvassers and volunteers and paid canvassers and staff and daylight and weather, out of those 35,000 doors, we were only able to knock on 157,000 doors.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Toder?
Thank you. Like the other candidates who I've seen all around the state, and I can tell you that they are making the rounds, it is important that we get all over the place. If you look at why people don't know what we stand for and why they don't trust us as often as Democrats, it's because they don't know a lot of Democrats and because we don't spend enough time in those communities. And so I spoke with a woman from the 8th district early in my campaign, and she said, you know, the best way that I've ever gotten people to vote in elections, and the best way I've ever gotten people to vote Democrat who would normally vote Republican is by helping them. And I truly believe that. Our internal motto as a campaign is doing well by doing good. And we go out every day and every week and try to find ways to make a difference in the community. Here in St. Louis, for example, and I know this isn't, you know, across the state, but we did an Afghan refugee drive where we worked with an Army captain and raised over $50,000 and filled 2 storage containers for the International Institute that we'll be delivering next week. We're doing the same kinds of things all around the state as we build coalitions and find ways to reach out to people who don't normally vote and who normally vote Republican. Because as you know, if we replace every Democrat vote with another Democrat vote, we still get slaughtered in the next general election. And I have no interest in running this race just to win a primary. We need change. We need change now. We need to get across the state as often as possible and find the people who we can help as often as possible. I'm an entrepreneur by trade. I work in the startup community. I run a medical device startup as well as a home rehab business. And we have a saying that says you should create painkillers, pain relievers, and not supplements in the entrepreneurship community. And that means you go out and you find the things that are hurting people's lives and you go out and make those things better. And that's the best way to be influential and to make a difference. And that's the way we win trust and support. And so that's what we plan to do throughout the rest of the campaign, is to go out and make a difference in people's lives. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Mr. Kelly, same question?
Yes, the way our campaign will reach out and hopefully touch more people is through inclusion, imagination, and inspiration. To bring more inclusion into our campaign, you have to listen to people, and to listen to people, you have to be present. So of course, that means being out in the public, being there, listening, not just necessarily telling people what they want to hear, but actually listening to their ideas and evaluating those, because we represent the people. In terms of imagination, I live in rural America. I live right outside of Festus. And what I tell people is, if a skinny Black guy like me could run in rural America, so can you. If we want to bring, energy to the party, the best way to do that is to get people participating themselves. And so one of the goals that I have is to inspire other people to run. They may not necessarily start off running for the US Senate, but if they can run at the school board, they can run for alderman, they can run for mayor, even if it's not them, someone that they know. It's a community. We can do this. And then inspiration. I mentioned earlier that tragically my stepdaughter passed away at the age of 17. Before I decided to run for Senate, my wife and I, we started a foundation called A Fighting Chance. And we reached out to the community. And what we've discovered is that, one, we didn't have the training and most people don't. And there are many resources available, including the mental health first aid class. And we started to fund that. Our foundation started to fund that. And through that foundation, we've been able to touch thousands of people. A week doesn't go past where my wife doesn't get a call from a parent saying, I heard about your daughter, we need help. And so similar to what Spencer says, if you want people to vote for you, they have to trust you. And there's no better way of getting people to trust you than to help them. Mental health is a huge, huge issue. It is the second leading cause of death between the age of 15 and 25. It is something that there's still a lot of stigma around it, but it's something that our foundation has really put front and center. And when I'm on the campaign trail, my fellow Democrat candidates can confirm that I talk about that. I say, if there's one thing that you can take from my speech, is to take the mental health first aid class. So when people see that,
we appreciate that. Thank you very much. Sorry, we want to keep the evening moving here.
Yes.
To be fair, Mr. Lucas Kuntz, you will be our final responder on this question.
Super, thanks, Michael. So running a successful field program takes investment and resources. And so what we're doing, I mentioned before, we've raised $1.75 million. We're out raising the Republicans right now. We're going to invest in people in the state and putting money into the state and building out a true field program that can touch hundreds of thousands of people. We've now raised enough money that we can hire field directors next quarter. We're going to be able to start building out that infrastructure. We're going to have a long time horizon to build that infrastructure out, get a lot of people hired, get a lot of people working, organize volunteers so that we can actually hit all the places we need to hit around the state. It's just the reality of running campaigns. It's how Democrats won in Georgia when Stacey Abrams built it up. It's how we've won in Arizona. It's how we've won everywhere that we've won. It's very intensive, and the way to do that is to inspire people around the country and around our state to invest in the campaign so that we can invest in the people of Missouri. That's what we've done. That's why we've been able to get more grassroots donations than any other Senate candidate in the entire country. Percentage-wise, we beat out John Fetterman, we beat out Elizabeth Warren, we beat out Bernie Sanders, we beat out everybody, because what we want to do is fundamentally change who has power in this country. People understand that, and they know that Missouri is the path to making that happen. And so, like I said before, we are putting resources into that. We're putting them into the state. We're going to bring in a lot of money, and we're going to actually make that happen so we can compete and we can win.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to our third question of the evening now. And we will start with Mr. Shepard. And this is something I'm sure you'll have be faced answering as you are traveling around the state and talking to potential voters. How will you address the rising violent crime numbers in regards to gun rights as well as police reforms?
Thank you so much for that question. I think violence and crime in cities really starts at the cradle, quite frankly. I think that the statistic is if you don't get past a third grade reading level, that you're far more prone to end up in systems that are really, really destructive to society. And so as Democrats, we have great solutions already. It's a matter of getting them passed, investing in Build Back Better and what the Democrats were able to accomplish by cutting child poverty in half, I think is a tremendous step forward. And we just need to carry that momentum forward and make sure that we continue to maintain power against the forces of creative destruction from our friends on the other side of the aisle in order to get the kinds of investments here at home that we really need in order to drive down the rates of crime and give people access to opportunity. And so investing in early childhood education, after school programs, making sure people are able to get vocational training, community college and university education, all without debt as a barrier of entry. I think that's how we build an entire system that lifts people out of poverty and creates opportunity.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. And now we'll move on to Mr. Sifton.
Thank you much. So this is an issue I've worked on an awful lot in the state Senate. And there's so many different components to it, but just to hit some of the high points. I support the president's proposed assault weapon ban. I support red flag laws. I support the Justice and Policing Act and the Excessive Use of Force Prevention Act, which I mentioned previously. I've also voted consistently against lowering the concealed carry age in Missouri as well, something that the Republicans have been chipping away at for years. And there have been just a lot of bad gun bills passed in Jefferson City. We have managed to stop a lot of them. Unfortunately, we were outnumbered more than 2-1. And so we weren't able to stop them all, but we've done all we can. But on the other side of the coin, for crime prevention, there are some things that I've personally worked on, including one bill that I actually passed into law on my own bill number was eliminating the statute of limitation for prosecuting sex crimes against children. And that's something that is very personal to a lot of people in our state. It is very personal to me. I've also fought for and came this close, and Eric Greitens actually was the one who kind of blocked it at the end, to getting better DNA evidence collection practices in our state. There are too many people that are sitting behind bars that shouldn't be because DNA evidence wasn't obtained or wasn't used. And there are also a lot of people walking free that committed heinous crimes that haven't been identified because Missouri doesn't do what the majority of states do in DNA evidence collection. So those are some things. The other issue is just to attack the environment in which crime occurs. We need better wages for working families. We need to support the social safety net and do things to help lift families up so that people aren't left with crime as an alternative. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Toder.
Thank you. Well, this is a great segue because when you're talking about the rural community, we were talking about things that really matter out there as well. And if you think about gun violence, there's not just gun violence in cities. There's suicide in rural areas at such a high rate that it's one of the top causes, if not the top cause, I believe, of the death of adolescents in our state. This is something that we need to address. If you look at the opioid overdoses and the addiction rates throughout our state, as well as the lack of opportunity for young people to get educated and to have access to good paying jobs, we're setting ourselves up for crime. I truly believe that no one's born a criminal. I don't think any of us could ever imagine believing that there are people born worse than others. I've never seen a baby that I thought would commit a crime. But when we lack opportunity for people, when we don't create systems that provide them opportunity and make them grow, help them grow, nurture them, we put ourselves in a position to have a failed society. And that's a message that resonates throughout our state, regardless of whether it's urban or rural. And I think that you'll find that no one wants domestic violence, people who have committed domestic violence, to have access to weapons that can kill people. No one wants to worry about active shooter drills in their schools. No one wants high capacity AR-15s, on subways. This is all are on the Metrolink. It doesn't make sense. And these are all very popular things. These are just things that we've been stopped at passing, and our legislation has been stopped because we've been gerrymandered and suppressed so deeply that we can't get our votes out in the same way that we should be able to. And because the gun lobby has spent so much money in our state, making it a breeding ground for the availability of weapons. I'm inspired by the work of Moms Demand Action. I see a number of Moms Demand volunteers on this call, and I appreciate their work. And they've led the charge on that. And I hope to just participate and elevate their voices.
All right, thank you very much. And now we'll move to the top of my list here, Mr. Kelly.
Yes, I like the question. I didn't mention that I was born in Chicago, the west side of Chicago. And I said that I was the oldest of 18. There were 10 boys, 8 girls. And the way we were able to escape is through education. Now, I can't claim that I represent all poor people or all Black poor people, but I know for me and my family and for countless others, it certainly starts with getting an education. So there are many root causes to violence: poverty, lack of education, lack of jobs, mental health, and accountability. Accountability not only for the police, but also accountability in terms of criminals and gun laws, et cetera. But each of those root causes, I think we need to look at it from what is the legal or just way to attack the root cause, what is the safe way, and what is the fair way. And so we don't have time to go through all 5 of those root causes: poverty, education, mental health. But obviously, in terms of poverty, one of the best ways to address poverty does start with education, starting with pre-K all the way up. There's an interesting stat that's in the Build Back Better plan, and it says for every $1 that we invest, we get $7 back, right? So education is certainly key, and that means including at the federal level, revising our budget so that we put more money at the federal level so that the federal can give more state grants, et cetera. It means addressing the laws as the way schools are funded. Because if a kid doesn't have the opportunity to get educated, they're much less likely to get a good job and escape poverty. Mental health is huge. Mental health affects how kids and whether or not kids become criminals and so forth. So I talked about, investing more into mental health, police reform, accountability, making sure that we address the qualified immunity and so that the communities have trust. And the last thing I'll say before I go, I do not believe in defund the police. I understand the intent and I agree with increasing more resources for mental health, but the messaging in terms of defunding the police, in the cities, we actually need more officers, but we need to make sure that we have enough budgets to hire, retain, and train the best officers. And for those officers that are not up to par, that we find a way to get rid of those.
All right, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, and Dr. Ross.
I'm a member of Fund Peace Now. It's a grassroots organization, and they're holding the Biden administration accountable for the money that President Biden said that he was going to give to stop violence, crime, and prevention. It's a group, they've been having summits all summer long, and the money will go towards having programs for youth and anybody in the community. It's having churches be responsible for having activities and feeding people and just getting out in the streets and getting to know people. I also am a member of the NAACP. And for guns, I believe in strict gun laws. I believe that you should have a background check. And I believe in the hold, I don't think you should just be able to go in and get a gun and you have a history. So that background check should be mandatory. I also, being a former juvenile correction officer when I was in Minneapolis, I know about children being in foster care, being put in the juvenile place because of foster care. And then there were some that were in there for shooting. And I asked one young person one time, why are you just shooting people? I said, do you know bullets don't have names on them? And I said, you could shoot your mom, while you're just, they call it spraying back then. And he said, hey, lady, he said, that's good. I never thought about it like that. So if you educate the children, the young people, and you talk to them, and if you build jobs and create programs that will help people, I think they would do a lot better. People shouldn't be afraid of the police. I was a police civilian in 2017 and did some ride-alongs. So just getting out into the community and building partnerships with others and networking, I think would help with violence, crime, and gun violence. Thank you.
And I did it again. I'm sorry. I was supposed to keep an order, but I accidentally skipped over you, Mr. Kuntz. I'm going to come back to you. So you'll be the last person responding to this question.
Okay, sounds good. So this issue really comes back to the core theme of our campaign, which is, again, fundamentally changing who has power in our country so that these massive corporations and sets of elites aren't controlling the laws that get passed. And while that seems a little bit confusing because we're talking about gun control, I mean, we all know what the obvious things to do are for gun control. People have listened to them or have listed them. We know what we can look at and what's on the table and what isn't. But as everyone has said, like what we really need is investment in communities that have been left behind, like the one I grew up in. I mean, the first house I lived in is an empty lot. The one I joined the Marine Corps out of is vacant and abandoned. The corner store is boarded up. The 2 grocery stores that used to let my mom float a check, 3-5 days before the end of the month are now gone. People are getting payday loans. And, we'd have gone bankrupt a lot more than once if we've been getting payday loans our entire life at 300-600% interest. And so what we see, though, in our country is we see defense contractors and other big monopolies pushing our government to spend $6.4 trillion in Iraq and Afghanistan. I watched us build that. I watched a building get built in the middle of the desert in Helmand that cost $25 million that no one ever occupied. U.S., Afghan forces, or even the Taliban. It just sat empty. And the reason that we're putting money in there is because of who controls the narrative and who controls our politicians and our politics. And so it's the same thing with the Federal Reserve. Like, look, Democrats and Republicans are both to blame here. The federal government, the Fed Reserve has been printing $120 billion a month, every single month, and dumping it into Wall Street banks while they tell us that we don't have enough money to spend it on our schools, to spend it on before like pre-K, to spend it on after-school programs, to spend it on investing in our communities. The same way that they told us that all that money we were spending overseas was for something lasting and worthwhile. You all saw what happened with that. It collapsed in like 2 weeks, right? And so again, until we fundamentally break the link between massive corporations and politics, we are not going to get any of the things that we want. And my campaign is based upon that. And that's what we're going to do. If I get into the Senate, I'm going to raise absolute hell on it and people are going to join me.
All right. Appreciate it. It's been a jam-packed full evening. We have one more question yet this evening. So I appreciate everybody out there in the audience sticking around with us. Mr. Sifton will be the first to respond. And this is one right out of the headlines again today. How are you going to address the varied concerns of both rural and urban voters regarding the threat to climate change and the mechanisms for transferring to a clean energy world?
Well, the principal opportunity to do that for the nation right now is right in front of us with Build Back Better in particular, but there's also some good support in the bipartisan bill as well. We need to get that done. That has to happen, and I would encourage everybody on this call to write your member of Congress, call them, email them, reach out, let them know where you stand on it. It is important, and it's important to me. And I've worked on these issues in the Missouri Senate as well. I was a no vote on the XL pipeline, and I was pleased to see President Biden end it as soon as he got sworn in. I have fought to protect the Grain Belt Express project, which is a set of transmission lines to get wind energy through the Midwest, connecting Kansas and Illinois and bringing power to our state. Wind and solar is critical, and there are reasons why it's going to take more time than it has to this point, but we really can't wait. I mean, the evidence is absolutely everywhere. And in fact, I've actually done some environmental work in my own law practice, among other things, working to hold corporations accountable, because a lot of times through complicated corporate relationships, they try to pass the buck and play a shell game with where the liabilities and accountability can be fixed. And that's something that I've worked to help pierce through in my own law practice. My brother is actually a professional environmentalist. He works on wind and solar project marketing and consults with companies to help them get to net zero emissions. And yes, the government's going to have to lead on this, but there is a large role for the private sector to play as well. And sadly, there are some companies that are doing better on this than our own federal government and certainly our state government. But we absolutely have to tackle it. It is absolutely critical, and it's something that I will work very hard to address in the United States Senate. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Toder, same question. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? It seems
Now I
like
can.
I'm muted
Thank
and then unmuted and then muted myself. Reclaiming my time. Do I get to pull one of those? So I think it's important to recognize that climate affects everyone in our country and everyone in our world. Future wars will be fought over water, not over oil. If you look at our state alone, if you look at the city and rural differences, we've got rural areas where our water tables are absolutely being destroyed by runoff from CAFOs and these operations where they're contaminating the water supply. We have erosion and irregular crop cycles that are very difficult to manage. We also have the ability to be one of the highest wind producing states in the country when it comes to wind energy. I've done the math, I've looked at it. We can add $12,000 to $18,000 on average to farming incomes in the northwest portion of our state just by putting wind farms on them, just by putting a windmill up. And when we do that, we'll create jobs, we'll create infrastructure, someone needs to service those, someone needs to manage those. We can renew our communities and build our economy here. 73% of our energy currently comes from coal from Wyoming and West Virginia. And Ameren's currently mining Bitcoin with its extra coal capacity. This doesn't make sense. We need to preserve our ecology and our environment. We need to do it now. If you look in cities, the rate of asthma is more than double that of rural and suburban areas because manufacturing facilities in those areas have such concentrated smog and particles in the air. We know this. We just need to have these discussions up front and open and discuss what we can do to make it change. A lot of that can be done at a personal level, but most of it has to be top down in governmental approaches. I'm a firm believer in a climate corps. I think that we should be taking many of the people from our military and bringing them to plant trees, to clean up trash, to build communities as we address the issues that face us regarding climate. And most importantly, we need to invest in innovation. So I've been heavily involved in the innovation community in St. Louis. One of my previous jobs was doing all of the leasing for the Cortex district and in Bridge Park, our agri-tech district. I brought companies here and helped build our economy and invested in companies that I believe will be the future of our energy transformation. And that's what we should be doing in Missouri, where we have the resources and can do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I understand that some people had trouble hearing the last question, so I'm going to repeat it now here again for the audience as well as our candidates. And as you're traveling around and different people come and ask you, how will you address concerns between rural and urban areas, urban rural voters, regarding the threat of climate change and the mechanisms for transitioning to clean energy? And so, Mr. Kelly, you're up next.
Yes, we have to lead by example. I was talking to a constituent about the importance of climate change, and the response I got back was a good question. He says, well, talk to me when India and China complies. We're never going to get India and China to comply if we ourselves are not in compliance. So I'm glad that President Biden took us back into the Paris Treaty Accord, which of course addresses one of the ways that we are trying to address climate change, as a planet, because of course, this is a global issue, but the United States, we have to be the leader. And it starts with passing bills. Change happens when budgets change. And so we have to start at the top. We have to start at the federal government. And our laws have to address what is the legal thing to do. And if our laws are not built or created to inspire the private sector and the public sector to be more responsible, then we need to change those laws. What is the safe thing to do? And what is the fair thing to do? We know that it is not fair. I mean, whether you're Republican or Democrat, it's not fair to say, yes, our planet is in trouble, but we're going to shift our responsibility to our grandkids, right? So, returning to principle, what is the legal thing to do? What is the safe thing to do? And what is the fair thing to do? That's how we're going to address this issue. But it starts at the top. It starts by passing bills, the infrastructure bill, the Build Back Better bill, the Clean Air Act. All these bills are important. And it takes senators, it takes someone that's willing to highlight how important it is, and that's willing to listen to good ideas, whether they come from the right or from the left, to put those into practice.
All right. Thank you very much. And we'll go now on to Mr. Coons.
Yeah, one of my goals on this issue is try to help people recognize the national security concern we have on this. And so, like, when I worked at the Pentagon, we have a lot of internal studies that showed that for every degree warmer a place is, the likelihood of conflict increases significantly. That most of our bases are going to end up underwater if climate change and global warming continue at the pace it's at. And DoD is one of the biggest energy users in the world, and it's going to be more expensive and less resolute to use greenhouse or to use hydrocarbons. And so I actually wrote an article about this in the American Prospect, and I've been pushing this from the national security area and talking to people all around the state about it. And one of the things that I learned personally is when I was doing arms control negotiations with Russia. So I'd go over to NATO and I'd try to get our on board, our NATO allies on board to go hard against Russia on things. And I was finding we were having a challenge doing that. And we finally figured out that's because they're using Russian gas and they don't want to lose the Russian gas and the rates that they're getting. So what we see is that Western Europe, by buying all this gas from Russia, is actually funding Russia's nuclear weapons program. They're funding Russia's military modernization. And then the United States is paying defense costs, whether it's the nuclear umbrella or anything else over there, to cover the Russian advancements. And so what's ultimately happening here is the fact that we have a hydrocarbon economy is making things worse for national security. And so one of the pillars of my campaign is the Marshall Plan for the Midwest, where we invest trillions of dollars here building renewable energy programs in production so that we can start exporting energy rather than importing it. And even if it costs a little bit more, ultimately we save a ton of money if we send renewable energy products over to Europe and they stop buying Russian gas. Russia's economy collapses and we no longer have to deal with their military modernization of their nuclear weapons program. So I think it's important for everyone to realize there are other ways to attack this that we can add on that save the planet at the same time. And a lot of people in rural Missouri really care about national security.
All right, thank you very much. And now Dr. Ross, same question, please.
Okay, so first off and foremost, some people may not know what is climate change and renewable energy. So just to provide some education, awareness, and some resources. And, that's when we're going out and talking to people and just making sure that they're aware of that. And once they're aware of that, then we also can provide some tax incentives and some financial incentives and maybe some rebates, some federal grants, and also a policy that would regulate emissions on limits for power plants. So that would be for the rural and in the urban. Just that communication and that collaboration piece for both communities and for all communities, just to know that climate change, it is real. It's affecting us every day. Recycle your stuff. If you're able, get the solar panels, and there's resources for that, and just let people know how to get this. And, the windmills, it takes education. You talk to people, educate them, enlighten them. And I think they'll be more susceptible to try and just move forward to save this world. Thank you.
All right, and thank you. And now on to Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you so much. So yeah, climate action and being able to communicate that across rural and urban divide. I think it really all comes down to what's in it for me. And I think the answer is simple. Investing in a huge way in climate action, as if it's the New Deal of the 21st century, is the way that we're going to create massive new wealth in this country and tons of new high-paying jobs. On top of that, it's going to stop us from having a mass extinction event if the sea level keeps rising. It's going to stop an ocean current, and that's not good. We can't let that happen. Furthermore, there's a lot of other countries that are moving on climate action, and they're making the investments right now, and they're going to out-invest us if we don't start getting behind this in a really big way. And so, there's a big race right now between China and the United States, and a lot of our jobs, we're upset about our manufacturing jobs going over there. So I think we have an extraordinary opportunity with climate action to really get out there and tell rural voters, hey, you can make a lot of extra money. We have unrealized potential on your farmland. That's extra income for you. And in urban areas and in small towns, we have extraordinary manufacturing capabilities in this state in particular, with strong unions, and there's so many new high-paying jobs. And I'm really proud as senator to make sure that Missouri gets its share of Build Back Better and to introduce new programs to make sure that we're investing in a really, really big way. This is about American competitiveness in the 21st century, and this is about creating new jobs and new wealth right here at home.
Thank you very much. We are nearing the end of our time. It's been a very insightful and educational evening. We're going to let each of our candidates now do a 2-minute summation for the evening. Just a very, very quick reminder to follow Chesterfield Township Democrats on our Facebook page, and we will ask the candidates to post their contact information on that Facebook page if you have any questions for them. I'm sure they'll probably put their contact information in their closing remarks. But with that, I'm going to now let Mr. Toder start off with the summations. And again, we have 2 minutes for each summation.
Thank you. For starters, I think one of the things that wasn't brought up in any of the questions was COVID response and healthcare. And I think it's incredibly important that we deal with the biggest catastrophe that we currently have on our plate at a given time. And that's why 2 weeks ago, I penned an op-ed the Kansas City Star published, in which I was the first candidate across the country to call for mass vaccine mandates in every scenario that they could possibly be allowed for any eligible person. We need to listen to scientists. We need to listen to doctors. We need to listen to experts. And I truly believe that if we don't get out of this scenario, we're going to be wearing masks around each other and on Zoom meetings for years and years to come. And that's not sustainable. It's not okay. I'm sick of worrying about how I'm going to get daycare for my son, how I'm going to take care of my family. My grandmother passed away from COVID the week that she was supposed to be vaccinated. I'm sick and tired of seeing the death and destruction that are coming through. And we now have a pandemic of the unvaccinated that is destroying our lives. I'm tired of speaking with people who can't get into hospitals even when they don't have COVID because all of the staff beds are full. So that's incredibly important. We need Medicare for all. We need to listen to science. We need to listen to reason. We also need to find the votes that don't normally vote. That's young people. That's people in the cities where we've had a depressed turnout in the past. It's going out and finding people who need our help and making sure that they get out. We haven't done a great job at that. We haven't increased voter turnout. At my biggest call to action at a meeting like this is don't let speaking with Democrats be your only Democratic action that you take from month to month. We need to go out and find the folks who don't vote or who are sick and tired of the same things we're sick and tired of. The people who want action on COVID, the people who hate that there was an insurrection on January 6th and want change. Those people exist. And when we unite around these things that bring us together, we can put aside the policy and rhetoric differences to say that we're not going to live in a democracy if we don't pass voting rights legislation. And we're not going to do that if the Republicans take the House and Senate. They're going to block Joe Biden's platform going forward, and we're going to be in real trouble. That's why I'm running it. So please come to my website, spencertoder.com, reach out. You can email me anytime. I respond to every email. Looking forward to knowing all of you, and thank you for such a well-run meeting. My stop sign went up, so thanks again.
All right, and thank you very much. And Mr. Kelly.
Yes, I'm running for the US Senate as a military veteran, small business owner, and as a moderate Democrat. And moderate sometimes it has a bad connotation in this day and age, but moderate simply means what's reasonable. And what reasonable simply means is what's legal or what's just, what's safe, and what's fair. The only way we're going to win in Missouri is if we expand our base. We have to bring more inclusion. We have to bring more inspiration, and we have to bring more imagination to our campaigns. We know that the Republicans are going to come after us with everything that they have. We know that the reproductive rights, the discussion about that is going to be front and center. If we as Democrats don't stand up for that, we will lose. If we don't stand up for democracy and the right to vote, to ensure that every legal vote counts and every vote is counted, we're going to lose. We have to come together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Coons.
So I joined the Marine Corps in 2007 to serve everybody who helped me out as a kid. And over those 13 years, tours in Iraq, leading Marines on combat missions, working on a special operations task force in Afghanistan, leading arms control out of the Pentagon. I learned how to fight, I learned how to organize, and I learned how to lead. And I think the most important thing that we can do right now is win this Senate seat. I am taking those skills to this, to this journey and succeeding way beyond what I could have ever expected. We started this race, I started in March. I had no email list, nobody knew who I was, we had no money, we didn't have anything. And what you've seen is us be able to use those skills and a very clear message about fundamentally changing who has power in the country to reach thousands and thousands of people and make it very clear that we have an opportunity to actually win this seat. Again, we've raised $1.75 million in just over 6 months. I've been on MSNBC News 5 or 6 times. I am making this race a national race, putting it on the map, bringing resources to Missouri so that we can actually compete and win here. It's time that we did that. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I'd love everyone here to join me, to contribute at lucaskuntz.com, to join up to be a volunteer, to message our campaign, info@lucaskuntz.com for opportunities. I'd love to meet with any groups that you have so that we can actually win this seat and make a difference in the United States Senate.
All right. Again, thank you very much. And Dr. Gina Ross, your summation?
I'm running to pave the way for change. I'm just really passionate about helping people. When I first decided to run for US Senate, I wrote a song called Paving the Way for Change, and it's telling the story why I'm running and why people matter to me. All people. I was raised to love thy neighbor, treat people how you want to be treated. I believe in respect, cooperation, collaboration. I just believe in people being right by all people. It doesn't matter where you come from. I don't care about your zip code, what you look like, any of that. All I want to do is represent people by all means possible. I am a fighter, and I will fight for you, paving the way for change. You can find me at rossforussenate.com. Sorry, my voice, I feel it fading. That's why I'm just slowing down, but I'm going to be better, I promise you. But I will fight for you and I will represent you. rossforussenate.com. Democracy. If people are represented like they should be, everything else will fall in place. Democracy first, we the people. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Okay, and Mr. Shepherd now. 2 minutes for your summation.
Thank you. America's at a crossroads. I got into this race because I was horrified by watching the country slide closer and closer toward autocracy. And in 2022, it's really not much different. We're choosing between autocracy and democracy. And that's not really a choice actually between Democrats and Republicans. It is a structural choice that we can fix. Both parties are locked in a race to the bottom and a match for dominance and power. And we have to end that as citizens, as our responsibility. And all of that hinges, quite frankly, on Citizens United and its impacts. It's really popular for we as Democrats to say that we want to change who holds power in this country and to bash corporations. And that's part of the way there, but it's not going nearly far enough to save our democracy. We have to stop all millionaires and billionaires from being able to exercise more than 1 million times more influence every single electoral cycle than ordinary income Americans. Citizens United is the sole structure that is getting in the way of our agenda as Democrats to build back better, to solve climate change, to expand democracy and ensure American competitiveness for the 21st century. You could say Citizens United is the reason that Kyrsten Sinema, for example, won't vote to pass our agenda. And so zooming out even further, it's what's brought our society to the brink of sliding into autocracy, and everyone feels the impact of it right now. We deserve and need a candidate who's proven that he can't be bought and who can lead the charge and articulate to demand that we get campaign finance reform and electoral reform that's going to require building genuine and true democratic coalition building. We're not going to be able to pass any of our agenda, which we desperately need to pass, if we can't save our democracy. And I would love to earn your support for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate to represent our great state. You can learn more about me at tshepherd.com. You can email me at timothy@tshepherd.com, and it's TSHEPARD.com. I would love to see you. Thank you so much.
And thank you as well. And now, Mr. Sifton.
Thank you. Thank you. I've proven I can take on tough, well-funded Republicans in the electoral arena and special interest in the Republican agenda in the legislative arena. I've done it. The Republicans twice have gone into my background, dug up all the dirt they could possibly find, taken their best shot at me, and lost. We've proven that we can win tough races against well-funded Republicans, and this will be a tough race, but it's one we absolutely can win. I know how hard it has been to be a Democratic activist in Missouri over these last 8 years. We have had some very, very tough cycles. But we need to dispense with the myth that Missouri is a ruby red state. It absolutely is not. If you look back to the last comparable election cycle in 2018, the last midterm that we had, the statewide candidates for U.S. Senate and auditor between the two parties, the Democrats received 49.997% of the vote. Only 706 ballots was the difference in the state. That doesn't guarantee us anything for 2022, but it paints a very different picture than what we've seen in some of the other past cycles. I'd ask each and every one of you to go to scottsifton.com. There you can sign up to volunteer, you can donate, and I'd like to ask each and every one of you on this call tonight for your vote next August and again next November. Your vote matters, and please bring friends. We need your support. And I want to conclude simply by thanking Chesterfield Township for such a well thought out, well planned, and well run meeting tonight. I want to compliment the moderator and all of the organizers who were a part in this. This was a wonderful discussion, and thank you to all of my fellow candidates as well. It's been a good evening. Thank you.
And thank you for those kind words. It's been a very full, jam-packed evening. I'm sure all of you who have stayed through with us, and I noticed from the count, just about everybody has stayed with us this entire meeting. I think you'll agree we got 6 well-qualified candidates, and the next 13 months to the election will be very full, but we do have the primary coming up before that. And while people may say, well, the election's next year, this is the time to be contacting your neighbors, building that base of support. And we encourage you to stay active, even though it may seem like the election's a long time away. It's going to be here faster than you can blink your eyes. So with that, again, thank you to all of our candidates tonight. Thank you to all the participants who stayed with us. Please follow the Chesterfield Township Democrats on our Facebook page for information about future meetings. Again, we had to keep a lot of our announcements abbreviated because of the very full agenda tonight. So again, thank you for joining us tonight, and be safe out there.
Thank you.